Alright, so here we have another PTR patch notes for Warcraft 3. The game is still, well, not really alive, but not really dead. It's just kind of there. And yeah, we got more patch notes, so let's see what this entails. Map pool updates, balanced bug fixes, additional improvements, subject to change. And that's the key thing to remember. These can still be changed, and they will largely look at feedback, I'm sure, to see what they should change. I would imagine Back to Warcraft probably gets the most exposure as to what should be changed, but also if they talk directly to any top players, maybe that'll influence things. Maybe Grubby will do a patch notes review because he usually hops on those sort of things, and maybe they'll listen to that. I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to do my patch notes review, the only one that actually matters, Kappa, and I'll look over it. So save and load functionality doesn't really matter much generally, I think. Ability to view heroes XP bar. This is huge. I believe they actually had it so you could hover over it to see it, and then they removed it so that it did some other method, and now they're having it there as well, which is good, but it just should have already been there. Whatever. View profiles, okay. I briefly looked over these, and I don't think any of it particularly matters apart from like tournament matches, like fixes for tournament matches, not not kicking you out anymore. So that could be good. But otherwise, nothing too important to look at in particular, just overall fixes. You can look at those if you'd like, but we are going to go on to the juicy stuff. And the juicy stuff is the actual patch notes, how the game changes. And first, we shall look at human. Militia duration increased from 40 to 42.5. I think that's probably fine. My experience when I've played human a bit was, honestly, you really just need 2.5 extra seconds. I don't think you need 5 seconds or 10 seconds or anything like that more, but like the extra 2.5 seconds is really about how much you need. And so I think this is a big change. I think a lot of human players will enjoy that. I do find it funny that there's sometimes where humans will actually call militia to bring peasants to a gold mine when there's no threat there, and then they have to wait for the timer to finish before the peasants can actually build. So in that sense, there's times where people will actually have 2.5 seconds more where they're not being able to build. But in general, it's a good change and will help for combat. So I think this is good for human. Bash bonus damage increased from 25 to 25, 50, 75. If they're going to buff MK in some way, I guess this is one of the ways to buff him without actually buffing him and making him broken. So sure, go ahead, I guess. But if you look at it realistically, you're still grabbing level 2 bash on level 4 because you're not choosing it over clap or bolt, particularly bolt, because you generally don't go clap bash. So this is not till level 4 anyways, and if it's not till level 4, then it generally only matters when you go Mountain King first. And even then, you're usually doing your damage at level 3, right? That's when you're trying to get a bunch of pickoffs when you first buy boots at, probably like the first night, your expansion's starting to go up. You're level 3, you're roaming around with bolt and level 1 bash, and nothing's changed. And then at level 4, when you've already done the damage, you get this like small buff. And I think it's negligible. Like it's a buff, but it's not like a huge buff when you consider times when human used to have Mountain King Clap do like more damage or whatever, right? And that's like AoE and a lot more than just 25 total damage for each bash hit. So I think these are negligible. And then the 75, like you're just not going to see this. This is like minimum level 6, if not level 7 before you have this. It just doesn't matter. This is inconsequential. It doesn't matter. Whatever. At that point, there's a lot of other important things for your army and your heroes than this bash damage. So, like I said, it's a way to improve Mountain King without actually improving him, basically. Which, sure, it's probably fine, because I do think improving human heroes is probably one of the better ways to improve human. Because I think if you improve their units, they get out of control since they rely on expos in a lot of matchups, and expos then translate into extra economy, and extra economy translates into extra units. So buffing their units gets potentially out of control. So heroes probably the way to go, but I don't know if this is particularly what they needed. Whatever. Moving on, devotion aura increased from 3.55 to 369. This is terrible change. I don't know what's going in their head, but that is way too much armor. Because Paladin first Blood Mage rifle builds actually can go, or actually should go, Devotion 3 on level 5 to begin with, I believe, because Holy Light level 2 is already 400. The only time you particularly need more than 400 is when you're healing a hero, and if you're healing a hero, you're probably banishing your hero first and then healing it, in which case you're already healing it to full. So this actually matters for Paladin rifle strategies. And in those cases, if you haven't already, like, you probably just already win with this. Like 6 armor is absolutely insane. Like this is, you know, if you have like a level 4 Paladin, I don't know if it's realistic. Would you do a tier 2 push and somehow get a level 4 Paladin? Maybe it's less big than I thought, but it's still huge. And I don't know if it's good. I think it's bad. So, you know, we'll see. But I think the big thing here is also that level 1 aura is also increased. If they were going to increase devotion aura, maybe 246 would have been fine. Because then each level of devotion aura is kind of like an armor upgrade, except it applies to your heroes and your units and all units, not just whatever the armor upgrade applies to. So something like 246 probably would have been fine if they're going to improve it. But this seems like overkill in my opinion. So I think it will be changed. I don't know how much it will be changed, but 246 can probably be done. Because otherwise we are definitely going to see way too many people suddenly convert to pally rifle strats, and they will probably start doing pretty good at lower MMRs in particular. Maybe at higher MMRs this doesn't even matter as much, but it will definitely still be used to some extent at higher MMRs, like maybe a Paladin second. So yeah. And then I did look somewhat over the patch notes, and I saw that this seems to be a change aimed at melee strength heroes. So basically all the melee strength heroes, which I think in Warcraft all the strength heroes are melee, right? Unlike, you know, games like Dota or whatever. But yeah, they're basically getting rid of 10 move speed and also doing minus 10 move speed on a couple key heroes, which we'll talk about when we get to them. I think, I'm not sure if these were needed overall, but maybe it's fine if that's how they want to do it stylistically. So yeah, Mountain King generally is already going to be given boots anyways in a lot of matchups, so mostly affects Paladin, whatever. Now we move on to Night Owl, or I could say something about human in general. I think these human changes in general are current meta small-ish. Like current meta, they really only care about the militia. Devotion will see a lot more play, particularly at lower levels with Paladin Rifle, but I think the bigger thing here is that human doesn't really see nerfs, apart from, you know, this, which is also going to be nerfed on other heroes for other races. And the key is, how does it translate compared to what the other races got? So it'll be more important to look at the other races first. Now for Night Elf, we got Talon cost increased by 10, which I think is a bad change, unneeded. The real change that should have happened here for Talons is revert their damage type from piercing back to magic when they're in crow form. Because currently, their role with piercing in crow form is to counter destroyers. The reason being because when they are webbed, they obviously perform better than hippos when they're webbed, because they can still shoot at range against destroyers and kill them. Whereas hippos are melee and can't hit the destroyers at all unless the destroyers fly on top of them. And so when I think about that, it's like, well, Talons shouldn't be countering destroyers to begin with, because they are literally the biggest caster unit that Elf has, and somehow they're countering the anti-caster unit that Undead has. So I think this is the wrong way to go about the change. The real change should have been revert the damage back to magic in crow form, and then if they wanted to buff Talons at that point, instead of like nerf it, like they're nerfing it because the piercing is strong, but they should be buffing it because the magic is weak. And in that sense, they could just have more magic damage in crow form, right? Or maybe the fairy fire in crow form is already researched, kind of like Sundering Blades was for knights, instead of like that 25-100 cost research that I think you even need master training for. I don't know. So I don't really like this. I think it's the wrong way to look at Talons, but whatever. Immolation activation cost increase from 1 to 5. I think that's a good change. I think if they are going to nerf immolation, this is the proper way to do it, through mana cost. I think the damage is fine. I think you can deal with it. It's definitely strong at certain points in the game, but it has to be strong at certain points in the game or it just wouldn't be used. So I think nerfing the mana is plenty big, especially because now you have to actually think of when you want to activate it. You can't just activate it, deactivate it and activate it again, particularly when the opponent is microing and splitting units and so on. Now you're going to have to likely just leave it on if you want to keep using it, and you can't afford to just turn it on and then off and then on and then off as you get closer to units again and again, right? So I think this is a good change. This is whatever. Activation requirements, whatever. Warden blink cooldown. Now, level 2 on skills generally is meant to be kind of a significant boost to level 1. I'm not sure if it needs to be down to 5 seconds. That sounds pretty good. Which is good, but honestly, I do wonder if they could have maybe gone like 10.6.3 or something instead of 10.5 2.5. So if anything, I would slightly nerf the change, but still be a buff overall, of course. But maybe this is fine. It's just 5 on level 2 blink seems pretty good. And then 2.5 on the max one obviously is pretty insane if you actually get to that point, but that's like level 7 warden, so you're mostly looking at this one, right? And 2 seconds quicker on blink when it also goes from... Okay, so this is an insane buff to begin with, because warden blink is 10 seconds and 50 mana cost on level 1, right? That's because of orc. Now talons are nerfed because of undead. Talons is already not meta against orc. They are used situationally, like some maps they will be used, but yeah. I feel like this is more directed towards them countering destroyers. I don't know. If you want to say it's versus orc, then sure. Maybe it's fine. I still don't think this is the right way to change talons. Yeah, but I don't think this is... I don't think this changes much anyways. Just whatever. Didn't they used to be at like 145 at some point anyways? I don't even remember. Anyways, for the blink, what I was talking about is 10 seconds cooldown at 50 mana cost. And now when you get it to level 2, it's going to be like half the cooldown, 5 seconds quicker, and it goes to 10 mana cost. So this is just insane. And I don't really think it needs to be that insane. I think the fact that you already get the mana cost from 50 to 10 for this is already really good. So if they are going to buff the cooldown, I think it should be more like 10, 6, 3. Something like that. In my opinion. Fan of Knives, max total damage. Honestly, as insane as this sounds, I don't think it changes much in a lot of scenarios. It really only affects facing like mortar rifle builds or Garg builds. Because against workers, you aren't hitting 8 workers to begin with, right? Like when you fan a knives a gold mine at a human gold mine, you're usually only hitting 4 peasants to begin with, which is not even reaching the 300 cap or total damage, right? Or is this change different than I think? Like, is the base damage increased, or is it the number of targets? If it's the base damage, then it's significant, I guess. Yeah, I guess maybe if this is base damage, then yeah, I guess it's pretty significant. Because how much base damage is this now? 5 by 5, 240. It's 240 then, right? That still doesn't one-shot peasants, does it? Aren't peasants up to like 245 or 250 health or something now? Assuming it's base damage, I guess it's pretty significant. If it's number of targets, then it's whatever, it doesn't matter too much. But yeah, I guess if this is base damage, which I guess it might be, right? Because they don't really say anything about number of targets. It is one-shot peasants. How much do peasants have? Is it 235? I thought they were up to like 245 now or something. I don't know. They've been changed so much. 240. So it exactly one-shots them. I see. Okay. Well, if this is actual base damage, then yeah, this is significant change. Even at level 1, now you can actually do something with level 1. Like if you go over at level 1 or level 2 with Warden to poke at the peasants when they're initially creeping, you can actually consider using a fan rather than scaling Shadow Strike. How much is this then? So divided by 5 is 160. And before it was 125. I mean, obviously it's an improvement, but this one doesn't change that you still would use 2 fans to wipe workers. But you might get like the first peasant kill quicker because you're going to like poke at it with a couple auto attacks and it'll take less. It'll take like 2 less auto attacks. It's significant. Personally, I don't really play Warden, so I'm not sure the impact, but you'll definitely see Warden more if this is done. And I think the combo of these is probably too much. I don't think Warden needs both of these. So if they are going to buff one, they should only buff one. Right now, Warden is not totally busted. Oh, in PTR? Yeah, I think having both of these is bad. If they are going to buff Warden, it should just be one or the other. Or it should be like I said, I think this is already too much. I don't think it should be 5 and 2.5. I think it should be like 6 and 3 at best. And then this is probably also too much. I think if they are going to buff both of these, they need to both be less than this. It's just too much. So rather than like what is this? 185, 30. So they're giving it 36 more damage per target. Is that correct? That's so weird. I don't know what the numbers should be exactly off the top of my head, but yeah, this should be decreased. Anyways, the Warden one, I think it'll be important to look at it, how they advertise the changes next PTR patch update. But right now, I can't really make a judgment on it other than it needs to be changed because this is too strong together. Spiked Carapace, melee damage return, fine. Spiked Carapace bonus armor. I don't think it needs to really be increased, but if they are going to increase it, I think it should be like 369 instead of 4812. I don't think you need 4 extra armor for level 1 Carapace. So I don't really like this one. I think it's too strong. It might still not even be used over Beetles and Pale anyways. But when it is used, and there are situations where it has been used, I think that's too strong. Necromancer changes with Raised Dead, Cripple, and Skeletal Mastery are very bad changes, should not exist. And I don't know where they hired this intern from, if it was Twitch chat or what, but Necros should not be buffed in like any way, shape, or form. They should be deleted from the game and not exist. But if we're going to look at it, let's say a necromancer now has 300 mana. So before, that necromancer with 300 mana and cast 4 raised deads. So you have to dispel, let's say you have 4 waves of raised dead going off from your necromancers on average. Now, at 50 mana, that means you have 6 waves. You have 50% more skeletons that you have to detonate, potentially, or dispel, or whatever, which I think is bad. Because they're already... I think, honestly, Necros are already strong. I think Necros are the most underutilized unit in the game, probably. I think if pro players utilized Unholy Frenzy, they would realize how strong their army can be. The only reason they don't, I think, is because it's much easier to streamline into just the tier 3 and orb and stuff, and because it requires like half as much micro. Because Unholy Frenzy, you have to manually cast every Unholy Frenzy, right? And then you might have to recast if some of them get dispelled. But Unholy Frenzy is insanely strong. Like, think about Bloodlust, right? Everyone knows Bloodlust is pretty crazy when orcs can actually get it. Orcs generally don't get it because they stay tier 2, but when they do, it can do crazy things, right? And Unholy Frenzy is even stronger than that. The health drain from Unholy Frenzy is pretty minimal, especially when you have statues, Unholy Aura, and potentially even Blight. And the attack speed is more than Bloodlust. So it's definitely underutilized, particularly in matchups where they don't even face Dispel, right? Orcs won't even get Dispel versus Undead, generally, unless you play Cryptlord. Humans as well tend to just skip the Sanctum and go for Night Gyro. So imagine if Undeads could just fit Necros and Unholy Frenzy into their armies in those situations. It's crazy how powerful it could be. But most people don't want to do it. Like I said, it requires a lot of extra micro to always be manually casting the Unholy Frenzy. And then you're stuck with having to add a temple, which slows down potentially your tier 3. So I don't think Necros are necessarily weak. It's just Undead currently functions where they want to rush tier 3. Either way, I think these are... like, if they're going to buff Necros, sure, you can reduce the cost of Cripple a little bit, that's fine. Skeletal Mastery, sure, you can reduce that cost too. Whatever, these are fine. Maybe, whatever. I can deal with these. I don't think Raised Dead needs to be buffed, especially to this extent. Like I said, this is 50% more skeletons that you're able to summon. And for races like Night Elf, where you have a finite number of detonates because you have to rely on AoE dispel from wisps, that's a big deal when they have 50% more skeletons. Humans as well do sometimes run out of priest mana. So, not always. Sometimes humans have unlimited mana, but sometimes they do. I don't like this one. And overall, I just don't think they need to be buffed. But I believe they are getting buffed because people want to see Necros used more at top play. That being said, I think they are already strong. They're just underutilized. Yeah, that's my thoughts on Necromancers. I think this will be changed slightly, but I'm not sure which parts of it will be changed. So we'll discuss it again if they have another patch notes thing. Yeah. Cooldown increased. That's pretty good. Currently, you're able to slow way too many targets by just microing the nerubian on everything. And then they got the strength heroes getting their move speed nerfs, just like human, and Lich move speed nerf. So, like I said, there was a couple heroes that were not strength heroes that they decided to reduce speed for as well, Lich being one of them, and that's pretty huge. That being said, with Unholy Aura, it probably doesn't matter too much, but there are instances where you don't have Unholy Aura, such as when you play Lich first. And when you play Lich first, this is actually a big deal. I don't know how good all of the movement speed changes are in general, but I don't necessarily hate them. However, I think there is something you kind of have to see in motion, because 10 move speed is not exactly a crazy amount, but it can matter. Anyways, for undead overall, the changes are mostly the Nerubian getting nerfed that people have wanted to see. And then currently necromancers getting buffed. So you'll probably see necromancers a lot more, at least at lower and middle levels of play. And I already know some players, even at somewhat high levels of play, will go into necromancers when they feel nothing else is going to work, and in those cases, this could matter too. Maybe it'll just be used more in general because of this mana cost being so much drastically lower too. I don't know. So I think there'll be more necro usage. Nerubian Tower nerf, good. Moving on to Orc. Bladestorm damage increased. This is bad, in my opinion. I don't necessarily hate them buffing Bladestorm, but buffing it by 50 damage per second is extreme, because Bladestorm actually does damage to units properly, right? If you think about some of the other skills like Earthquake or Death and Decay that can take out buildings, which Bladestorm can also do, they're not too good. They're not like that great against units, right? They're channeling, so they can be like interrupted. They're kind of slow for what they do. But Bladestorm's pretty just quick, and you're able to just move your blade on top of what you want and so on. And you can also just siege buildings with it. So in particular, if you have like blade that reaches level 6 and you have like a lot of raiders and you're doing hit and runs, this kind of matters a lot, because 50 extra damage, I forget how long Bladestorm lasts. It's like 5-6 seconds, 5 seconds, I don't know. But let's say it's 5 seconds, then that would be 250 extra damage to buildings that the Blade Master's touching. And 250 damage to buildings is quite a lot. So if they are going to buff this, maybe start somewhere around 130 instead of 160, in my opinion. But that, I don't know. That being said, it is an ultimate. Ultimates should be kind of strong and used, whereas sometimes they are literally not even taken. People just take, non-ultimate skills. So I don't know. Hard to judge it. But at 7 seconds, oh my god. So that's 350 extra damage to like buildings? Okay, like this kills a Moonwell in 4 seconds now instead of 6 seconds, right? 2 less seconds to kill Moonwells if you're like hitting multiple Moonwells at the same time. Or Ziggurats or Burrows. I think they're like all 600 health, right? Hold on. Or Ziggurat's like 500. No, they're all like 600, I think. Somewhere around there. Spirit Walker build. Okay, so this one, there's a bunch of Spirit Walker changes here. And I did the math earlier. So if you get like 3 walkers with adept training and do some sort of timing push, theoretically your timing push could be 30 seconds faster now, which is kind of significant. That being said, currently orcs use a lot of shaman, particularly against human and night elf, but this may sway them more towards walker, which isn't necessarily bad. It might be a fine change. I just do wonder if something like, you know, the 3 walkers with adept, for instance, if like that extra 30 seconds you save now from this to do that for like a 50, 60 food time push, whatever, if those 30 seconds are really meaningful or not. Like if you're able to do a push 30 seconds quicker, generally that's pretty good. Like if you think about it from like an elf going tier 3 bears or something, and you're hitting your timing push 30 seconds faster, that could be quite significant. So we'll see how it works out, but I don't inherently hate this change. I did feel like walkers were slightly slow, but I do wonder if they need both of the dirt changes. Like maybe they could just have the training quicker and not necessarily the build time, or maybe they could just have the build time and not the training. I don't know. We'll see how it works out, but I don't hate it. And then they got a bunch of armor, or the upgrades for orc. Steel upgrades are, I believe, the lowest upgrades, and they're all reduced by 25 wood. I'm not particularly sure why. I assume that's because they know orcs generally want to fit in what's it called, fortified, and so if they're fitting in fortified, then they're not able to always afford these on top of that. But instead of making all of these slightly cheaper, they could have just made fortified cheaper wood cost instead. Maybe that would have been a better change. I'm not sure. Maybe this is the better change. Orcs will be more tempted to go for these first and might not even have fortified, and then you kill their burrows. And then they blame everything on someone else. Yeah. And then we got more move speed changes, all the strength heroes. I'm not sure if this one should exist. Like if I was going to take one away, I think Alchemist should maybe keep its move speed, because Alchemist Chemical Rage currently functions off being able to chase down stuff and hit it a bunch, right? So I don't necessarily like this one. But those sort of Alchemist builds potentially already buy boots anyways, so maybe it doesn't matter. But this is good, this is fine. This is probably good, because Naga Sea Witch, they called her Naga Sea Switch? Okay, dude. Anyways, she kind of needed to be nerfed in some way, similar to how people probably wanted Lich nerfed in some way. That too, they nerfed the move speed on Naga and Lich, which also means they didn't have to necessarily nerf their skills. So Nova is still extremely powerful. Frost Arrow is still really strong, especially right away on level 1. Frost Armor is really good as a secondary skill. Ritual is still decent. Forked Lightning, when it's level 2 and level 3, are both really good still. So they still have strong power, but now they're a little bit more vulnerable. So I think that's fine. A fine way to like slightly nerf them. Oh yeah, and as for Orc, talking about Orc here, a lot of buffs, but not necessarily what I would have expected, in that less wood cost and faster walkers. Honestly, as a whole, I'm not even sure how these changes play out, because I think Warden is going to be changed before the final patch. I think Devotion will be changed before the final patch. And I think necros will be changed before the final patch. All of which I mentioned should be changed. I don't think they should go in this state. They can technically buff the ease of necros, like I said, but they can technically buff something on warden, but I don't think they need both. Devotion, also, like I said, too much. Maybe a smaller buff, like 246. I think those would be better. But overall, I'm not even sure how this affects the current gameplay. Like, if it goes through as is, you'll see a lot more warden from Night Elf. And you'll see a little bit more necromancer, or a lot more at lower levels of play. Not sure about high levels of play. They might still not use it. And then orc. I think the orc's the big one. They'll actually probably try to utilize walkers a lot more rather than shaman when they can, particularly against elf. But I think they were already using walkers against elf more often because there was less keeper these days. So this is probably a good change for orc against elf. Yeah, overall, if the problematic things get updated again before final patch, I think it'll be good actually. And then items. So these are worth talking about. So why is my browser like going so slow? Or this web page? Okay. Circlet. Item level reduced from 3 to 2. This means it now drops back at the same camp it used to, I believe. Which means claws of attack +4 starts to look even more garbage now. I already felt it was kind of mediocre-ish compared to like Ring 4, apart from if you're like a ranged hero trying to fight before you're tier 2. The rings are better. But yeah, now even more, you don't want the claws, you want circlet. Because why get claws 4 when you can get +2 to your main attribute and +2 to agi and +2 to whatever the other stat is? It's just so much better. So I don't know. It's kind of weird that they changed it back. I don't necessarily hate circlet being at that camp again, but I think if they're going to do this, they should have claws be claws 5 again. Because I think clause 4 is underwhelming as is. Tome of Retraining having 2 charges in the shop is fine. It's whatever. Rusty Mining Pick. So I've seen some mentions of this. And it's apparently a level 3 item. So where Circlet used to drop, I think it's like the camp that has Pendant and Periapt and Ring 5 currently. Crystal Ball, stuff like that. And this item is bad design and should not be in the game. That being said, it is also too strong. So the +1 damage is mediocre. 15% chance to bash. RNG. But I guess the question is, does it get extra damage from bash? Like, are you popping off for like 25 damage when you get a bash? Because if you are, that's insane. And if you aren't, well, the item's still pretty good because being able to stun something with just a right click is incredibly powerful. And the biggest thing to think about here with an item like this is if you're facing an elf who's going like Keeper, Naga, Priestess, triple ranged heroes, and it's a marketplace map like Northern Isles, and Northern Isles has 4 camps that drop potential of this item, and a marketplace that can store this item. think it's just 4, right? It's the labs and the gold mines. Then there's a lot of chances to get this, and with the marketplace, you can potentially have all 3 of your ranged heroes with orb and bash, and basically anything they target is just dead. Which sounds horrible, and it should not be in the game. It's cool that they're thinking outside of the box and like adding something new and crazy to the game, right? But I don't think bash is the way to go if they're going to do that. If you've looked at other games like Dota that has bash in it, they've changed bash a lot, and it's one of the things they've actually, nerfed. I'm pretty sure Dota largely has just more buffs, and the game just, everything's balanced if everything's not balanced, right? But bash, they actually nerf because it's just too strong. So I don't think it should be in Warcraft 3 either. And yeah. Like, it's not a big deal on the Mountain King, for instance, as a skill, because he's passing up another skill in order to take it, right? You're passing up Clap or Bolt, which are both strong, in order to take Bash. And he's a melee strength hero, which is one of the worst heroes to make use of Bash. So it doesn't matter much in that type of situation. But when you're able to get this on like a melee agi hero, like Blade Master and Demon Hunter, or a ranged hero that can just poke away, like a Archmage or Lich or Keeper or whatever, like this is just crazy and should not exist, and they should be ashamed for thinking of this, and think of something else, please. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Map pool is updated, which I assume is just like BNet, of course. Different time zones for the tournaments, which is cool actually, because there were some tournaments that didn't see like any play at all, but also just a BNet thing. So yeah, overall, apart from the few problematic things with necromancers, warden, and devotion aura, I think the changes are fine. Potentially good, actually. But I want to see how they update warden, necromancer, and devotion aura, because I think those are all too strong as is, but they could exist in some form, right? I gave my suggestions already. I think devotion, if they are going to buff it, could be like 246, and that would still be plenty strong. Paladin's already strong, right? But if they are going to buff it, then 246 is fine. It's like slight buff. I don't know. And then warden, you don't really want warden to get out of control, so I don't think buffing 2 different things on her is the right way to go. But if they want to buff one of these, or like only make it a slight buff on both, maybe that would be okay. Or if they wanted to increase the amount of targets Fan can hit, but still have the damage the same per target, I think that also wouldn't be so bad, because then it mostly affects like Gargs. But if it's just more damage on each target, that's kind of a big deal. We'll see how it plays out. But if they are going to buff it, it doesn't need to be this high. It could be something like, it could be something like 1050 instead of 1200, because then warden would still, like against peasants for instance, after a fan she can one hit right click each of them down, which I think is in line with how other AoE skills work anyways. And then this, like I said, could be brought back down to 6 and 3. Because this is just an insane upgrade. You go from 10 and 50 mana to 5 and 10 mana. That upgrade from level 1 blink to level 2 blink is crazy. I don't know, some sort of different change would make more sense. If I was to give something else, like what I would have thought should be changed before even looking at this, I would have probably said literally the same thing for the activation cost of immolation. I would have, I'm not sure if I would have said this, but this is honestly probably about right. I think an extra 2.5 seconds. I think wellspring cost could be increased. I'm not sure about changing the mana in the wells, but at least up the cost of wellspring would probably be fine, because people would still get it and wellspring would still be good. Nerubian tower change, good. I'm not sure what I would have changed with orc though. I think I would have mostly nerfed the other stuff and left orc the same. But I don't hate this, because this is something that competes with what shaman currently do. So it's not like it's inherently super strong for orc. It's just now you have an option, right? You can go shaman or you can go walkers, because walkers are a lot more accessible when they have the faster build time.